Okay, I think we're going to get going here. My name is Mitch Berman. I'm your moderator for the panel today. And this is my third Cannabis Forum event since Digital Hollywood decided to take this up. And over the course of time, I've watched this industry continue to move in various directions, but one thing has kind of stayed in place, and that is confusion. That tends to be the word that defines the cannabis industry for me. Confusion. There's confusion on the legal front. There's confusion about the difference between hemp and CBD and marijuana itself. There's confusion at the FDA. That tends to permeate many of these panels. I've been sitting here this morning and just listening to the other panelists, and that tends to be the word that defines what's going on in this industry. And to add to that, you have the political realm. I know that I was up here, I think it was last October, where we had the leader of the state Senate with Senate Bill 930, which was going to allow banking in California with regards to cannabis. Didn't pass. We now have a bill, Senate Bill 51, that's a variation of the 930 that apparently is, I believe it's up for a vote on Thursday. So there's Assembly Bill 1356 that will take, in theory, create 2,200 new shops in the state of California versus the 630 that exist today. And as we all know, there's great confusion around Proposition 64, which passed in 2016. That was to legalize for the entire state of California. But if you take just the county of Los Angeles, there are, and I don't know if anybody knows this, but there's 88 separate cities in the county of Los Angeles. We have one of them represented here today with Jackie, with the city of West Hollywood, but 88 of them. And if you pick up the LA Times on any given morning, you'll hear about the angst that the voters passed 64, but the cities haven't enacted it. And so there's a lot of confusion, and today we're going to talk about some of it. The panel today is about FDA rulings. It's about hemp, it's about CBDs, it's about banking, and just local initiatives, what's going on out there. And we have a panel of people who have dedicated their lives, in some instances like you, Bruce, you've been alive a long time like me, and you've dedicated a big chunk of your life to this way before this became a subject of real discussion. And so we're going to talk about that, and what I'd like to do is start with a story of banking. And I told this story the last time I was up here in October. And it really goes to the heart of how crazy this world is. The fifth largest grower in the state in the country invited me and some others from the entertainment and digital technology business, because he was trying to tell a story about what he was doing with this facility. He invited us up to Pahrump, Nevada to see this place. And during the visit, we were in his office, and we were just talking about the industry as a whole, and two ladies came in from his staff, and there were like, I don't know, 100 people working there. And they were wanting to pay a vendor. They said, excuse us for interrupting. They said, listen, we got a vendor outside, can we pay him? And the head guy was with us, and so he said, if you don't mind, excuse me. He got up, he walked to the back of the room that we were sitting in, and there's this huge safe. The safe was like a Wells Fargo safe from the 1800s, and it went to the ceiling. He opened it. It was right in front of all of us. He opened it, and there was well over $2-3 million in the safe in the form of cash, all wrapped in plastic. And he told the lady, he says, look, just go get a brick and go pay the vendor. And I'm sitting there going, this is 2018? Really? That's how we're doing business now? And it's all links back to a lot of things we've heard today, particularly at lunchtime, about the federal government and all that. And, so we have all these bills, Assembly Bill 1356, which I think is tomorrow. We had Proposition 64 pass. We've had Senate Bill 930 for banking go down. We have Senate Bill 51, I think is Thursday, is the one I was thinking of. All of this. So, folks, why don't we do this? Why don't you introduce yourself very quickly, because we only have 45 minutes, and I really want to get into the discussion, because I know some of us have already been outside here talking about some very interesting things I think we could share with the people sitting here. Jackie, let's start with you in the city of West Hollywood. Tell us a little bit about what you do there, and what really, and I'd like each of you to do this too, what really keeps you going during the day? What's your main focus when you sit at your desk, drink your coffee, and say, okay, I'm going, here we go? What is your main focus? So tell us what you do.
Hi, my name is Jackie Rocco. I'm the Business Development Manager with the City of West Hollywood. Thank you for inviting me to this conference. I basically work with businesses in the City of West Hollywood, anyone that's interested in opening a business or existing businesses that are interested in expanding, and just helping them navigate the bureaucracy of all the rules and regulations to open a business. I have also been on the Cannabis Committee that was responsible for drafting the cannabis ordinance that established the legal framework for licensing businesses, cannabis businesses in West Hollywood. And I mean, on a day-to-day basis, I work with businesses, again, just helping them through this process. Right now, we are in the process of helping the businesses that were selected during our screening application process to open a business. There are some challenges for some of them, because one of the interesting things is that although I'm at the local level working in government, the state, it's also has developed their own regulations, and they're not always in alignment. So we are dealing through some challenges right now, and there's an assembly bill that Mitch had mentioned, AB 1465, that was hoping to establish consumption lounges, and we're still working through that process.
Bruce, go ahead.
Well, I've been down for the cause since I started my law practice in 1967, and has taken up the mantle of trying to change the laws when I began. When I saw the inequities of what was going on in the courtroom, and I saw plenty of it, because I'm proud to say I've defended more marijuana cases than any lawyer in the United States over those 50 years. But again, I saw the political field of trying to change the law was the only way it's going to happen. So in 1968, I created an organization called CAMP, the Campaign to Abolish Marijuana Prohibition. In 1973, I took on the directorship of California, Los Angeles NORML, the National Organization for Reforming Marijuana Laws. And that's what I represent here today. NORML represents the consumer. We're looking out for the people that use it and need it and want it. We're not necessarily involved with the business of pot. Those are not our constituents. We work for people that have the problems day in, day out with the using marijuana and the results of the laws that have been so inequitable and so unfair and unjust. So my day consists of still defending cases in criminal court. I now morphed into a licensed lawyer as well. I work with several different firms, including my daughter Allison and others, and legalizing their activities. So it used to be 5 or 6 years ago a criminal act, and now they're getting awards for having been in the business. And so my days consist of that, and also answering questions on the phone. When I first started my practice many, many years ago, I remember some Hispanic Americans would come into the office and tell me they use marijuana to back press to put on their backs because of pain. And I thought that was a joke. I had no idea there was medical properties attached to the use of marijuana. So over the years, again, I've been down for the cause. I fought the battle. I ran for office 4 times as assembly, governor, U.S. Congress, all on the marijuana platform, and helped open up the political agenda. And I think I did my part in making it more acceptable as a political issue, and I think we've come a long way. And when I hear what happens today, when I just listen to the speakers today, I mean, this warms my heart. Such articulate people here speaking the words that I've been trying to formulate for the last 50 years in such beautiful ways. And I'm really proud to be here. I thank Digital Hollywood for putting this together. And I thank you folks for being here and supporting this effort to educate and promote awareness and freedom. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. So, Peter, you have an interesting background because you left the peacefulness of the ride-sharing world, Lyft, to go into cannabis. Tell us about what you're doing with ease and what your focus is when you get up in the morning and get to the desk. What are you trying to do?
I would be delighted. So I am the lead for policy research at Ease, and for those who are not familiar, Ease is a platform, an e-commerce platform for legal cannabis in California, and as of recently now in Portland, it's easy one-stop shopping for consumers to go to ease.com, put a delivery address in, see what's available from the retailer that services that location. It's delivered to them on demand, makes it very easy for them to make sure that they're buying through the legal market. Everything is going through all the state and local regulations and taxes, and we're hoping that this keeps people in the legal market. So my role as head of policy research is to really understand what information is being produced from academic institutions, from industry research groups, from think tanks that really touch on all the various topics that come up in public policy discussions relating to cannabis. So that can be anything from public health to public safety to environmental rules to access issues generally to economic issues, job creation. So try to be a little bit of an expert in everything with various degrees of success. And then we also look to, Ease as a delivery, as an e-commerce platform has insight into what consumers are buying, where they're buying. We also have access to them to ask them survey questions if they should elect to provide information more about who they are and what their purposes of consumption are. So we're using all of this. We just, as of January of this year, published our 4th annual State of Cannabis report, which is really shedding light on exactly those issues, trying to break through the stigma and the uncertainty of who the consumers are, and give some real data-based education into exactly that, those insights of demographics and purposes for consumption and products in the marketplace. And I think that's it's a key component. I think at the very core of what I do, I'm an educator. I educate my teammates, so our government affairs team and our public affairs team, so that when they're out there, they're having intelligent conversations based on reputable research, and then also using our data set to fill in knowledge gaps where academic institutions may be interested in studying it but not able to for funding reasons or restriction reasons, and we as industry can move a little bit faster and really bring this to bear at a time when it's relevant to the policy conversation.
Okay, thank you. Derek, you're a storyteller.
Yeah.
You're the publisher of Civilized.
Yes.
Take us through, what is it that keeps you going during the day? What's your focus? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, look, I'm a guy who built a media company for himself. In 2015, I became fed up with not being able to see myself in cannabis culture. And, stoner culture for me was everywhere, but I just didn't see myself in it. So I decided to build one, and Civilized was born. And now, 4.5 years later, we're speaking to 5 million motivated, productive folks who choose to enjoy cannabis as a healthy part of a balanced lifestyle. And that's what keeps me going every day. All we did when we started was we began and embraced a post-prohibition mentality about cannabis. And we speak about it like grown-ups to grown-ups. So we're a little bit of news, a little bit of information, and a little bit of entertainment. And it's developing that audience, finding those audiences, and empowering people to come out of the cannabis closet in the legal states and in Canada. It's my contention that the cannabis closet, especially in Canada, is gone, but people are standing in the shadow of it, and it's time for them to step forward. I feel that people can and should feel good about cannabis, and that's what I'm trying to do, eliminate the stigma.
Thank you. Okay, Ariel, super lawyer, protector of cannabis world. Tell us what you do on a daily basis and what your focus when you sit at your desk. What are you trying to accomplish?
Thank you. My name is Ariel Clark. I am a cannabis business, corporate, and regulatory attorney, and a longtime cannabis and policy reform advocate. I co-founded a law firm called Clark Newbert LLP. We are a women-owned and run cannabis practice. We have 4 offices in California. We now also work a lot in the hemp space. We work with businesses across the supply chain. So that's really exciting. It's also been really exciting kind of being involved in the emerging hemp and CBD industries as well. What gets me up in the morning is doing the best job for our clients as we possibly can and as is practical with all of the changing sets of regulations on a local, state, and federal level. It's incredibly complicated for businesses to operate. We work with a lot of legacy cannabis operators, and making that transition from the unregulated market to the regulated market is a very difficult pathway. As was mentioned earlier, even though 70% of California cities voted yes on Prop 64, 76% of local jurisdictions still ban. We only have retail shops in 10% of those jurisdictions. And the list of challenges for people is just massive. So working very hard for people, always having an immense amount of integrity and thoughtfulness in the legal work that we do is what gets me up in the morning. In addition, the cannabis plant is a healing plant. It's also a plant that has a massive amount of industrial application, medical application. What gets me up in the morning is that I am a medicine woman. I am part of this change of bringing this plant and all of the myriad opportunities that we are just scratching the surface of. I get to help with that. I get to work with tribes, I get to work with doctors, I get to work with other lawyers, I get to work with so many people to create change. I work with a lot of women. I am so grateful every day to wake up and that I find myself in this place and being a part of this change. That is just the beginning, because we're going to see psychedelic type medicines, and we're seeing that more and more. So it's just, in the most positive way, a gateway drug.
Thank you. So, as you can hear, these people dedicated their lives to change. Change is not easy, no matter what it is. Human behavior is such that most people resist change. This is probably one of the biggest change factors that's ever hit us, particularly in this country. And there are those who are out in front, and there are those who are lagging behind. We've heard it all day long. So the theme for me for this panel was, as you heard, confusion. And each of them are dealing with that on a daily basis. I mean, I'll go with you, Derek, just to start, because being a storyteller, that's your job.
Yeah.
Take us through on what you're dealing with and how you're trying to, shall we say, demystify hemp versus CBD or marijuana from itself, and all the different flavors thereof from the, shall we say, cacophony of conservative view that this is going to kill us and it's going to do bad things to our children and all that. What are you doing to demystify the confusion?
Well,
Let's just start with hemp, for example.
I'm going to wind it back a little bit, because really, I think, I'm somebody who believes that all cannabis is medicinal. I'm somebody who chooses, I'm an adult use guy. I'm a Friday and Saturday night guy, and it's not lost on me that I'm trying to defend my right to party here. Cannabis was a replacement for alcohol for me. In my mid-30s, I was somebody who liked to have a couple of beers on Friday and Saturday night. Didn't really have a problem with it. Had a problem with it the next day when my hangovers became a little too crippling and started lasting 2 days. And in my mid-30s, I had a couple of small kids with my wife, and I just decided that I wanted to be a bit more present. So cannabis became that thing that I could enjoy on Friday and Saturday night. And what I like to say that I do on Friday and Saturday nights is sand the edges of the world down a little bit. I don't want to go at it with a buzzsaw. I want to take the edges off it. So it's always, for me, been recontextualizing cannabis in a world that tolerates alcohol, which is so much more harmful to individuals and to society. And my favorite story on that is from a friend of mine who was a prison guard at the Kingston Penitentiary in Ontario, Canada, it's been shuttered now, but it was the worst of the worst penitentiaries. With, we do have some assholes in Canada. There are a few serial killers that we need to lock away, and this is where they all were. If he came into work on a Saturday afternoon and somebody said there's alcohol on the cell block, those cell blocks were shut. Those cells were emptied and tossed, those inmates were segregated, and they made sure that the problem was solved. If he walked in on a Saturday afternoon and smelled a little skunk, he would look at his buddies and just say, well, it's going to be no trouble tonight. And that to me crystallized cannabis. It's responsible for alcohol is responsible for so much harm to individuals and to society. It's a no-brainer. So I am constantly reminding people that it's hypocritical to tolerate alcohol and not to tolerate cannabis.
I'm throwing it open to the panel, any panelist. Let's just focus on just hemp for now. What's going on in California? Anybody have any anecdotes or updates on what's going on just with hemp?
Well, I know what it used to be, and that was that in order to raise hemp, you had to do it together with an institution of higher learning for purposes of investigation and for research. Other than that, you couldn't grow it at all, okay? And so that's where we were stuck for all these years, about 15 years now. But now with the new hemp bill, the farm bill, it opened up the whole territory. You're talking just now to Ariel about the Indians, for example. They are now being able to pursue their opportunity as well. What about that, Ariel? What's it do with the hemp and the Indians?
Sure. So some really positive thing with the new farm bill is that tribes, so federally recognized tribes in the United States, can develop their own hemp program just like state governments can. And so what we're seeing in California, whereas Californian tribes are still left out of the California regulated cannabis market, which is absolutely outrageous. Native people in California cannot sell into the California regulated market. That is an absolutely racist, unfathomable state of affairs, but it is. And we're going to keep trying to change that legislatively. But in the meanwhile, these tribes can develop hemp programs and just like other states submit that information to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. In California, there's been some new developments on the hemp side. You can now register with the State Department of Agriculture. You can register as a hemp grower. You pay like $900 and you fill out a form. And you have to use very particular seeds that have been certified. Most of those seeds that are certified for industrial application, so that's something to be aware of. A lot of people are kind of looking at hemp as sort of a really massive opportunity, which it is, but it's very important to remember that it's going to be a patchwork. It is. I think 22 of the 58 counties in California still are disallowing, they still ban hemp. And so we're going to see a patchwork of laws, so it's important to know what your agricultural commissioner in your local jurisdiction will allow. And then also make sure that the crop that you're growing, it has to be under a certain percentage of THC, and you have farmers that are growing crops and it's over that percentage, and I haven't figured out, I mean, I'm not a hemp grower, but I understand there's some types of technologies that will allow you to kind of extract that and get under that THC amount. So a lot of exciting stuff to think about, but definitely more of the weeds that we talked about earlier.
But to add to the confusion that you keep talking about, this is all related to hemp cultivation, but then hemp CBD products are another story, and it's creating a lot of confusion because people see that, well, hemp is now, allowed, and, with the Farm Bill, what it did was that, yes, it allowed for hemp cultivation, but each state has to develop and implement its own set of regulations for retail sale of hemp CBD products, and California is not there. And this is creating a lot of tension at the local level because just like a lot of people thought cannabis was going to be the new gold rush, now people are seeing CBD as the new gold rush, and you see a lot of individuals, wanting to venture into that environment and running into all sorts of obstacles and legal barriers because we're just not there at the state or local level yet.
That's true. And the important part is that you mentioned it, is that California is not regulated hemp, so it's illegal until it gets regulated. That's our problem. But by you investors out there, keep your eyes open, ears open in the future, because hemp's going to replace wood products. We'll be making houses with it. There's going to be a tremendous opportunity for investment in the hemp industry in that area. It's not simply CBD or XYZ. We're talking about hemp is going to replace a whole industry of building materials and everything else. And that's the place to think about if you're going to put your money out there.
Peter, are you coming across this at ease? I mean, this is part of your public policy research and, shall we say, the demystifying of the confusion as it relates to hemp? Are you dealing with any of that on a daily basis?
We do. So as of November last year, we also launched Ease Wellness, which was an online platform direct to consumers of hemp-derived CBD-only products. So we are seeing, I believe that we have had interest, we've had deliveries to all 41 states that allowed CBD in their boundaries. So we think, people are definitely interested. And I think if you look at the polling generally on cannabis acceptance, we're there. We're at the majority of people believe that this should be a legal marketplace. So I think this is the next stage of evolution is people are interested in learning more about cannabis and about hemp as a way to experience cannabis without having to worry about that pesky, THC being in there. I think, we've also seen development, especially from older adults, looking towards CBD as like sort of the entryway, but realizing that there's more benefit, especially when they're looking towards sleep and pain relief, actually including THC. So looking at not just the hemp-derived piece, but looking at more full plant or at least THC in combination, that there's benefits there. So their entry point is hemp because it's available and it's easy, especially in states where you may have only a medical program or no medical program. But the interest we're seeing is there for further products in the space.
Okay, I'm going to come back to CBDs in a minute. I want to go to the licensing within the cities. I know, Ariel, you and I were talking about that. You and I were talking about that, Jackie. So again, there are 88 cities in the County of Los Angeles. One of them, West Hollywood, has been out in front. Somebody once said to me when I was a young guy starting a business, "Hey Mitch, nobody wants to be first, but nobody wants to be second either." Okay, you guys were first. You're allowing for cafes to take license, and I know because of some of the work I do with the mayor of Los Angeles on other things, that back in July when the city of Los Angeles was granted some dollars to go and do cannabis licensing, a bunch of people prior to that, because they got wind of it, probably some people in this room, ran out and they opened storefronts. They took a lease on a building so they could open up their own shop. And they were rubbing their hands together saying, "Oh boy, here we go." And what happened was nothing, because the city of Los Angeles wasn't prepared for the onslaught. They hadn't hired enough people, and I'm not even sure they're ready now. And I know you may or may not be able to talk to the city of Los Angeles, but I know you could talk to the city of West Hollywood. You want to get a business license today and not get stuck with holding a lease with an empty building, waiting for you to get approved. Take us through what you do in the city of West Hollywood if you want to open up a shop. You can open up a cafe, is that correct?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and our process is different than Los Angeles in that, keep in mind that, well, a couple of things. West Hollywood is an extremely progressive, liberal city, and we are used to pushing the envelope and just living on the wilder side of life. So for us, moving in this direction, it wasn't a giant step. And also, the other thing about West Hollywood is that, we have had medical cannabis in West Hollywood for, at least 12 years, during, or longer than that, during the HIV/AIDS, epidemic in the earlier. It's just hard to even think that it's been that long, but the city of West Hollywood made a concerted effort and a huge commitment to the community that we were going to embrace medical cannabis to help our residents and the people that were struggling with that terrible disease. So we've had a history of cannabis in our city. So when adult recreational use became the law, it wasn't a giant step for us to begin considering that. At the same time, we're only 1.9 square miles compared to Los Angeles, which is almost like its own little state. So we weren't able to just allow just anybody to open, a cannabis business. We have 4 existing medical dispensaries that were allowed to then begin to sell adult retail cannabis. And at the same time, when we crafted our ordinance, we developed a merit-based system for selecting companies that wanted to open a business in West Hollywood. But the one thing that we did to keep the process as fair and objective, but also to give as many people an opportunity to participate in that process, was that we didn't require an address as part of your application during that initial screening process. And what that did is, our objective was that we wanted to get a multitude of applicants, not just big corporations, but small business owners, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and by not requiring an address as part of that application process, people could develop really innovative and creative concepts and submit their applications and pay the fee for that application process, but not be stuck with a lease while they were waiting to hear whether or not they were selected. And that, we think, made a tremendous difference, because once you sign a lease, you're stuck with that lease, even if it's for a 1-year minimum. And the other thing that it's happening in terms of securing those leases is that many property owners are not willing to lease to cannabis businesses, and some of it is not an unreasonable fear that they have. This is still illegal at the federal level, and they fear losing their properties. And we've been very honest with them, because we are the only city that had a property seized by the feds, so we know what it's like. We leased it to a cannabis business about 14 years ago, and the feds came and took it from us. So we know it's a real thing. And once, for a while, it wasn't much of a fear, but once Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General and rescinded the Cole memo, which had essentially not made cannabis prosecutions a priority for the DOJ, a lot of property owners became really, really fearful of leasing properties to cannabis business owners. So, I think some of that has dissipated to some extent, but even the ones that are willing to enter the market, it's, property owners that own their properties outright and are not financing their properties through banks. And they're also either, asking for some pretty hefty rents, or they're asking for some ownership stake as part of, leasing the property to the cannabis businesses. So, it's something that it's evolving. It's, a lot of people are learning a lot from it. Property owners are still a little bit on the fence, but for the business owners that are going into this market, it's an arduous process. It's something that they need to really be aware that you're in it for the long haul, because regulations are evolving and changing. And while we in West Hollywood have completely embraced and welcome, all aspects of it, and especially with the consumption lounges, because we felt that it was hypocritical to say that this product is now legal in California, but we are not creating any legal safe spaces for people to safely consume, just like it was done for alcohol. And we think that's an important part of it, and that's why we authored the, Assembly Bill 1465 with Assemblymember Bloom to introduce a license for consumption lounges and cafes. And we hope that even if this isn't successful at this time, that we will continue to fight this battle, because it's an important part of the regulatory structure.
So this is just the city of West Hollywood.
This is just West Hollywood.
Ariel, Bruce, I know you
Well,
being legal. Let's talk about outside of West Hollywood. What's going on out there?
One of my efforts has been to get on-site consumption licenses for the state of California, because as indicated by Jackie, there's no place to go. Unless you have a residence, you're illegal. That's like inviting people from out of state, come take our product, come here on vacation, go home on probation, okay? That's what it comes down to, arguably, So this is a very important aspect. And one thing about the new bill itself, 1460, was it 14...
65.
What's it going on?
1465.
It just came out. It's going to include smoking flower as well, which I think is very important, because people talk about CBDs and XYZs. I've had a lot of conferences I put on under my guise of my particular, another hat that we have, it's 420 Yoga, and we explore different aspects of using the cannabis in different areas. And the bottom line is, what I'm hearing from the experts is, there's a tremendous amount of cannabinoids, and the more different kinds of weed you smoke, the more probability you'll get those in your system. And I think people should try every aspect of weed, whether it's flower, CBD, XYZ, get as much of your system as possible any way you can do it. And number three is, if you really want to know about the laws, please consider being part of NORML, the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws. It's doing a wonderful job in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. We're a nonprofit organization. Just go online. You can get our free information about what the laws are, or you can go to LA Normal, or you go on my website, 420 Laws. You get a pamphlet that tells you what the licensing laws are, what the current laws are, because I think people here think they're pretty hip to what's going on, but I bet you 10 of them out of 20 don't know the laws specifically. It's important everybody knows what's going on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. Ariel,
Yeah,
from your
Ariel.
perspective on your daily
Tell us about
walkabout.
LA licensing law. Tell them
Sure.
what's going on. It's exciting.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. So the city of LA is probably like the biggest cannabis market in the world. And it's been a very long road to try to get the city to issue business licenses to cannabis companies, which seems wild, but a lot of us along here, whether we've worked with the city of LA or in other sort of educational or in other jurisdictions, we've been trying to push this very massive ball up a hill. Where things are at today with LA and new retail licenses is that later this week, the city will start accepting applications for social equity applicants, which will be the only applicants that will be able to apply for new storefront retail licenses. This pre-verification window will be open for 60 days, and then the city will have 2 rounds of application processing. One will be on a first-come, first-served basis. There will be 100 applicants or licenses that will be issued. Non-storefront delivery will also be processed at some point, and then later on in the year there will be round 2, which will be done a little bit differently. So in short, finally, after so long, the city is going to open up the opportunity for people to apply for retail. But this means that at this point at least, there's no new manufacturers, no new growers, and no new distributors. Where the city is at with regard to those folks, the supply side, is that there are a lot of people who applied who were existing growers, manufacturers, and distributors, and most of those people are still working their way slowly through the application process and waiting to be inspected. But I just would like to say that, Jackie and I sat up here on a panel maybe 2 years ago, and I'm looking at all of these distinguished people, and I'm sure so many of you in the audience, we are all really working together on all of this, and thank goodness, for example, the city of West Hollywood really has come out and continues to fight these issues. Yeah. Thank goodness, and all of us are here doing this important work, so I just really honor everyone.
So it begs a question, in what other cities, let's just forget the state
Long
of
Beach.
There you go, County of LA.
Pasadena, Long Beach.
Oh, they're all over the place. Okay, you can get licensing in many parts of the state. For instance, up in Lompoc right now, Long Beach, Santa Ana.
Santa Barbara, a lot of the desert cities, because
Palm
those
Springs.
cities, tend to really need.
Right. But let me tell you something. The city of Los Angeles is going to give out equitable licensing. That's going to take up all the dispensaries. That's going to be the end of the game, because they're only allowing 490 dispensaries. They've already given out 156 of them. So if you add those to the social equity people, up to 2 to 1, that's going to be the end of the story as far as dispensaries are concerned. So in the city of Los Angeles will be limited only to manufacturing and other areas besides dispensaries. But there's many places around the state and the city, not the city, but other cities in the state of California. And there's, as a matter of fact, something very exciting about it. It's a new bill just passed in Congress, in Assembly, I believe it passed. It says that the cities, I think you touched on this, that where they voted more than 50% of the constituents voted for Prop 64, now we're going to be required at least to have 1 dispensary in every one of those cities or counties. That's going to be about how many? 560 different locations are going to have dispensaries, and every place you go, you're going to be able to buy some weed legally, finally, okay? So that's a weather breaker here. So we're moving in the right direction, but it's a slow process, and like Jackie was saying, it's a gamble to be in the marijuana business, but you have to just tough it out, and I think everybody's going to be okay at the end of the game. I think the feds are going to change their game as well, as been spoken earlier, and so have faith, don't give up.
All right, I know we're getting a wrap up here, so I'm going to give each of you a couple of minutes to wrap up your final comments on what you'd like to see happen over the course of this year for 2019. From your perspective, what would you like to see happen? Anybody can go first.
I'd like to see them sell marijuana like they sell broccoli. And matter of fact, as far as I'm concerned, we pay income tax, we pay sales tax, that's enough bullshit taxes, okay? And if the people can't afford weed anymore, they're gonna go back to the black market. It's so damn expensive to buy an eighth, it's ridiculous. So something's gotta be done here. I'm looking for a new initiative, a new way to look at this whole process to give power back to the cottage industry that really deserves the break that we're talking about when we talk about equitable changes. What do you think about that, Jackie?
Hey, bring it on. I really think that we need to see the state work more closely with the cities in removing some of the barriers. I mean, I think it's still really difficult for businesses to be licensed and be up and running, and I think the state needs to be more in alignment with the businesses and learning. Some of the regulations seem to happen in a vacuum. I mean, when they made July 1st some arbitrary deadline to have all child-proof packaging, I mean, that had a horrible effect. I mean, they weren't thinking about the supply side of it, and then all of a sudden, businesses are having to dump product to comply with some totally arbitrary deadline. And I think this is where we get in trouble and why we see the delays that we see. But I am predicting that by next year, perhaps after the elections, cannabis will be off to Schedule 1.
Okay, 2019.
And I would love to see that. I mean, from my perspective, the biggest barriers we face really are around research. We've given ourselves lots of shackles with that scheduling. To the funding is restricted. Who can do it is restricted. Thankfully we've got Sue Sisley in the audience who has really tried to push it forward with getting better sources of cannabis, real-world sources of cannabis out there into the research space. So I would say if I could ask for anything this year for Christmas, it would be that remove the barriers that are keeping reputable institutions from doing more cannabis research and provide more funding. I know the state of California has money set aside right now from the taxes that's supposed to go towards research, but there is no process yet from the BCC to actually make requests directly to fund research with that money. So those are what's missing.
Thank you. Derek?
Well, all of this is going to be driven by people, and it's my hope that what's going on in Canada right now, people coming out of the cannabis closet and sharing their stories without fear of legal retribution. The government of Canada has given people the legal license to enjoy cannabis, but they haven't quite given themselves the social license. There's still people with a lot of anxiety. But those who are sharing, those who are raising their hands and sharing their stories in social media, for instance, are having an impact with Canadians, but they're also having an impact with their friends and family here in the United States and in England and in Australia and in Germany. So I want to see the numbers continue to move in support of all this, and people to feel more normal and more comfortable about something that they can and should feel good about.
Said by a very proud Canadian.
Hear, hear, yes. Who lives in Los Angeles?
Ariel, 2019.
Wow. Really, descheduling would be incredibly helpful to medical research, to access to banking, to all of the tax issues and the 280E. That would be absolutely incredible. Absolutely echo also what a wonderful dream it would be for the state regulators to work very closely and bills to be passed that would be helpful to cannabis companies. Unfortunately, the tax bill failed, but there are other bills like Senator Hertzberg bill for banking that still advance. So hopefully we'll see more of a closer relationship between the states and businesses.
So I want to thank my panelists, and I want to add a little inspiration before I completely say goodbye. They remind me of an American poet, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who once wrote, "Do not go where the path may lead, go where there is no path and leave a trail." Thank you for sitting in today. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.